Welcome to the Central Division Basic Snowboard Movement Analysis course. This course is designed to give you a clear understanding of how a snowboard functions and how to observe, evaluate, and score a snowboarder using the Central Division's visual cues for snowboarding and the senior scoring matrix. This program has been designed by the members of the Central Division Outdoor Emergency Transportation Team and the NSPC Snow Sports School. On the call tonight is Cody Jones from the NSP Snow Sports School, and Eric Jesseland, Chris Dragosh, and Brian Monroe from the Outdoor Emergency Transportation Team. As you progress through the video, it will occasionally pause to ask you a question. These questions are not graded, but give you the opportunity to reflect on the material that's being presented. Your lead instructor for the evening is Cody Jones.
Okay, so let's get into the snowboard stance. So we have a nice, stable, balanced, and flexible position with knees bent, straight back and centered core, allowing for quick movements and generation during the turns and in various conditions for riding. We have three main reference alignments that we use in snowboarding. These are going to be really key in looking at a rider to determine if their body position is out of alignment. First main thing that we're going to be looking for is that their shoulders and hips and knees are parallel to the terrain. Those are going to be designated by the green lines on the skeleton. The second reference alignment is going to be the center of mass over the working edge, and the rider's weight is equally distributed between the feet, kind of creating a triangle between the feet and the head. So that is going to be the red triangle on the skeleton. And really what we're looking for is that both legs have the same amount of flex. We don't have a leg straightened and that the top of the triangle or the head or the waist is centered between the feet. And the third reference alignment is going to be the shoulders and hips are perpendicular to the front foot. So if you look at the rider in the blue jacket, you can see that their hips and shoulders are pretty in line with the snowboard. When someone is riding straight at you, you don't really want to be able to see their belt buckle or the front of their chest. You want everything in the body to be roughly in line.
Let's talk about the ways we can move on a snowboard. There are four. Tilt, twist, pivot, and pressure. Tilt is how you control your edge angle. The more you tilt your board, the more you engage your edge through the turn. By flexing one ankle and extending the other, we create twist on the snowboard. Twist helps us start turns smoothly. Pivot is rotation of the snowboard and helps the board skid through the turn.
Is this pivoting too?
By shifting our weight between our feet, we control pressure on the snowboard. Keeping our weight centered or over the front foot is one of the most important parts of learning to turn. So how do these moves make you a better snowboarder? Tilt lets you start carving turns to control speed, but also lets you explore freestyle carving and tricks like the Euro carve. Twist lets us start turns more smoothly, big or small, and is essential as you get better and start exploring the mountain. Pivot helps you shape your turns and is the foundation to spins like 180s and 360s on snow. Pressure is how we move on a snowboard to shift our weight and is the building block for nose presses, tail presses, butters, and jumps. Basically, these four movements make up everything you do on a snowboard, from your very first turns to a double cork 1080.
Okay, so those are what's known as the four board performances. Those are going to be the four ways that we can control a snowboard, to have a snowboard interact with the snow, to allow us to drive the snowboard or interact with the snowboard in the snow. So we're going to dig into those four board performances a little bit more. The first is tilt. You can see that tilt is allowing the base of the snowboard to come off the snow. There's a few different ways we can do that. Inclination and angulation can be kind of confusing to keep the two straight, but with angulation, you kind of create angles with your knees and your ankle, as seen by the rider on the left. And inclination is when you incline into the hill, as you can see with the rider on the right. Ideally, we're going to want to be using a combination of the two to be able to get that tilt on the snowboard. And if you look at the effective graph, you can see that the different cues that we're going to be looking for to see if you are having an effective tilting movement or not. Next is going to be twist. Twist is the one difference between snowboards and skis is that we can actually twist the snowboard along its axis. And what this does is it allows us to engage or disengage one side of the snowboard to either initiate a turn or allow for like a pivot slip. And here you can also see the effective cues that we can look for to see if we are effectively using twist or not. Next is going to be pivoting movements. This is when you kind of skid along the flat base of your board on the snow. And there's a few different ways that we can do that by either using the legs or with counter rotation with our shoulder or upper body. But you can see there's some more effective cues that we can look for pivot. And then last is going to be pressure. And this is going to be managing the pressure of the snowboard along the snow. You can think of pressure as both where our weight is, but also what is the force of the snowboard on the snow. So if you think about tilting your snowboard, you have less snowboard in contact with the snow with the same weight, which means you have more pressure with tilt than you do with like a flat base. And then you also want to think about with pressure, where is that pressure on the snow? Is it on the front foot, on the back foot, or is it centered and along the base of the snowboard? We're going to talk a little bit about snowboard setups. We have two stances that we have regular riders and goofy riders. That is which foot is the most comfortable being forward. And the main reason that is important is because snowboarders often have the ability to do switch riding, which is riding with your non-dominant foot forward. So it's important when you're watching or working with a snowboarder to know what their comfortable stance is, so that if you're asking them to do drills, you can demo or have them do it in their comfortable stance, but also be able to identify if and when they're riding switch, that their normal board performance is probably not going to be what it would be if they're riding in the normal direction. So here we can see a lot of the differences between snowboarders and skiers is really not as big as it seems. It's all just interacting with the snow. A lot of the same forces are in place. So here you can see a skier and a snowboarder on different equipment, but you can see their stance is very similar. And you can see with both of these riders and skiers, you have a lot of inclination into the hill when we need a little bit more angulation to get back that center of mass and that pressure over the snowboard.
In the Ski and Toboggan Movement Analysis course, we learned about OEP, which stands for Observe, Evaluate, and Prescribe. Take a minute and look through this slide. Some simple steps to thinking about basic movement analysis include: what is happening? Can you find the one thing? Why is it happening? These are cause and effect relationships. The body performance, which is the cause, versus the effect, which is the ski or board performance. Then you consider how you would address this. What's the one thing you can teach them to facilitate a change? And can we build off of something they are doing well? Finally, how would you score this? Is it a senior level performance? Why or why not?
So getting into the first of the movement analysis process is observe. So we're just going to watch this rider together and kind of take some mental notes of what we see. Okay. If we can play that back, now we as a group, we can kind of all talk together and just talk about the things that we see that we notice. So first with turn shape, um, it's a little bit of a Z shape, a little slow to come around on the start of the turn, and then it comes around quick. And then he kind of holds that edge for a little bit until he comes across. What are some things that you guys see?
So Cody, when I'm looking at this gentleman, seems like his backhand is kind of helping him start that turn. Is that what you're seeing where he's using some upper body movement to help initiate?
Yeah, yep. Um, Getting a little bit more into the evaluation, but yeah, there's definitely I'm noticing that backhand and even that shoulders coming around a bit before the board does. You can see that hip come around. I'm also seeing, talking about pressure, I can see that he has a bit more pressure on that front foot there, um, as he's getting that edge around from down the hill to across the hill. There you can see he's really heavy on the front foot.
So that goes back to those fundamentals that we were talking about for stance for that A-frame.
Yep, exactly. Those reference alignments really are my main tool that I use when I look at a rider. Um, I'm always looking at those. Are they in those reference alignments? So you can see that talking about the parallel lines between the snowboard knees, hips, and shoulders, you can see that the shoulders are actually dipped forward versus being parallel with the snow. That A-frame, like you mentioned, uh, not not very even. Definitely stacked on that front foot. And then talking about keeping the hips and shoulders parallel with the front foot, you can see that, especially on toe side, his shoulders are a lot more open as he's trying to bring that board around.
So one of the things I'm noticing, Cody, is the angle at the ankle is good on the toe side, but it opens up quite a bit on the heel side, causing some inclination into the hill.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, so as a result, his center mass is over the snow rather than over the effective edge.
Yeah. Now we're just going to watch this. I'll let you viewers kind of take some mental notes and see what we can think about, and then we'll go in a group discussion again. Okay, hopefully you guys all saw that there's definitely a big difference between this rider and the last. Some of the stuff that I see, Again, just thinking about what we're observing, I'm noticing that his whole body is moving as one unit. I always like to think of it as that little toy soldier. Everything is moving in line as one, just following the board, staying in those reference alignments. I saw a little bit of chatter there, but a lot of that was able to stay in the lower body because he does have that really good flex. You can see really good angulation and especially inclination. So he's got a really good combination of both of those. Anything you guys notice?
One of the things that contrasts the previous rider is because he is in such a good position with his body in the center of mass, he's allowing for the shape of the board and the flex of the board to make the turn shape versus trying to foot steer it. And when you get to the slow motion phase, you can actually see the twist of the board. You can see the one foot moving more than the other foot to the new turn.
Yeah, that twist is really hard to see. But when you have a good rider like this, it definitely helps to see it a lot easier when you kind of see that gap close on the front foot, while the back foot still has a little bit of gap, and that means they've got pretty good twist in the snowboard. Thinking back to that A-frame, this rider is also doing a really good job of keeping centered between the snowboard. I think at this angle, it looks like they're a little stacked on the back foot, but as they come around that turn, you'll see that they're actually pretty well centered over that board.
I think, Cody, I see this snowboarder also being pretty dynamic, where they're extending and retracting as they're riding. And I think in result, they're varying the pressure along the base of support and that effective edge through that turn shape. And they're really pressuring that edge during different phases of that turn to create good control for the speed and overall travel of the board.
Yeah, that's a good point. So now that we've had a chance to look at a more ideal rider, here's just that first rider again. You can really see the stark difference in the body's not necessarily staying in those reference alignments. A lot less tilt on the snowboard. Not seeing any twist. So now we're getting into the second phase of the movement analysis process, the evaluation. Thinking about cause and effect. What is happening at the board and what is causing that board to do that? What is the rider doing and what is their body doing that is causing that? There's a lot of things that we can focus on. And when we're watching a rider for, say, a test, it's hard because you're watching it once. There's no replays, and you kind of have to take all of this into account all at the same time. We want to look at the turn shapes. Are they connected, nice and rounded? Inclination, angulation to create the tilt. Are they doing a good job of flexing those ankles and the knee to help create tilt in the snowboard, or are they just simply relying on leaning their whole body into the hill? Or maybe they're doing neither and not having enough tilt at all and really skidding those turns. Torsional flex is, as I mentioned before, pretty hard to see. But if they're not doing it, you'll usually see it in other parts of the rider as well. But kind of focusing on that front foot to see if that gap, as they're initiating that next turn, does that gap close on that front foot a little bit before it does on the back foot? Is kind of the best way you're going to be able to see that. Edging, again, getting into inclination, angulation, and thinking about the pressure management. Is the snow deflecting along the length of the snowboard? Is it deflecting off the back foot because they might be a little heavy up and their weight on the back of the snowboard? Or are they centered and using that full edge? Do they have a nice athletic stance? Good flex knees and ankles to help absorb any bumpiness in the snow? Or are they nice and tall and stiff and starting to get some chatter in the snowboard on the snow. And then switch riding, just being able to identify that they are riding switch and are they able to make good turns and ride in control while switch. So now we're getting into the evaluation. So now we're going to watch it once and let you guys take some mental notes of why are some of the things we saw happening, and then we can kind of talk about it as a group again. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about why what we noticed in the observation phase. We can get into a little bit of why that is happening. So I mentioned that the turn shapes were a little bit of a Z, a little bit slow to come around. And looking at the body, you can see that especially on the toe side to heel side, you can see that the rider is probably a little uncomfortable right there. If you can go back to that, when he starts that heel side turn, you can see that his hips and shoulders come around because he wants to look downhill. He wants to direct his body to where he wants to go. But what that's actually causing to happen is that the board is lagging behind because as he's turning his shoulders to face downhill, that is letting his board stay across the hill. When really what he wants to do is bring the board downhill to initiate that into that next turn. So since he's opening his hips and his shoulders to initiate the next turn, his feet are a little slow to follow. And then once that board comes around hill, then that's when he's pushing that leg back out, causing that quicker turn into that more Z-shaped instead of C-shaped turn. Anything you guys notice?
So Cody, is exactly what you were talking there. If that was someone that I was watching, could I ask them to maybe incorporate some torsional flex to help with that, or to get that to happen a little bit quicker?
Yeah, there's definitely a few different ways, and that would be a pretty good way to do that. Another tool that I use is having them grab low on their pant legs. That won't necessarily stop them from turning and opening their shoulders, but it will give a good tug on the snow pant to give a good indicator to them that, hey, yeah, I'm opening my shoulder. I need to keep that closed.
So what I'm seeing, and let me know if I'm off track here, but because he's not using torsional flex to engage that shovel, he's kind of cheating forward with his center of mass over that front foot to get some pressure to engage that shovel, and that takes the weight off the back foot and allows that back of the board to slide more. So he's having to use that back foot to direct the board rather than let the edge of the board shape the turn.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, he's getting that weight on that front foot to let him unweight that back foot to be able to kick it around.
Cody, what do you think of his athletic stance throughout this? Is he maintaining it, or is he compensating for it, or is he
So if go back just a tiny bit, he actually has a fairly good flex in his ankles and in his knees, but you can see that his shoulders are broken over a little bit. Um, Whereas his back should be a little bit straighter. He should be more, his back should be in line um, with his body pointing to his board instead of being bent over a little bit at the waist.
So that'd be a compliment I'd give this gentleman is he is keeping his knees bent during this ride. He is athletic in his lower body.
Yeah, definitely. And a good indicator of that too is there's no chatter on the snow with the snowboard. So um, even though the turn shape isn't where we want it to be, the snowboard is keeping good contact with the snow. We don't see any chatter once he gets on that edge and more of a side slip.
So I'm also seeing the acceleration in those turns, Cody, also seems like a little bit inconsistent speed. So we're seeing that because of that turn shape, you feel also?
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, that delayed turn means he's spending more time pointing downhill when he's not in a skid, letting him pick up that speed. Okay, let's get into the scoring section. Just as a reminder for scoring, we have a 1 through 6 scale, 1 being what we're looking for is not happening at all, 6 being that it consistently appears at a far superior level than what we're looking for, and 4 being the senior standard. So let's watch this rider and then we can look at the evaluation points and score this rider. Okay, so let's get into the scoring of this. Looking at the first point, connected and rounded turn shapes of varying sizes, consistent speed and control. Looking at the turn shapes are a little bit more of that Z that we've been talking about. The speed isn't the most consistent because of that. So I think this on the 1 through 6 would be a 2. Maybe a 3. Inclination, angulation, creating tilt on medium and long radius turns. Looking at the tilt of the snowboard, there really isn't a lot of it. You can see a little bit of it there. There they have a bit of inclination, but really not a lot of angulation. So I would rate this a 2. Utilizing torsional flex to begin rotation and engage the new edge at the initiation of the turn. I think as we talked about in the evaluation phase, they're really doing a lot of more with their initiating with the upper body and kicking that edge around than they are with relying on that torsional flex. And I'm not really seeing any instance where that front foot is closing that gap before the back foot. So I would rate this a 1. Edging achieved through inclination and angulation, snow deflecting along the length of the board. This is very similar to point 2, but this is getting into a little bit more of the pressure management. So this is looking at the snow deflecting along the the base of the snowboard. And we want to look and see, do they have snow deflecting off the full length of the snowboard, or is it more off of the back foot? And as they come around, you can see that a lot of it is off the back foot. But as they come around on this toe side, we'll take a look here again. Where is that snow coming off the snowboard? And you can see that a lot of it is off the back foot, some of it is off the front foot. I would rate this a 3, possibly a 2. Athletic stance. This is getting into that good flex in the ankles and the knees to let them get a little bit lower and have smoother turns. And they actually do have pretty good flex in their ankles and in their knees. You can see that there's a few points where the snowboard might have a little bit of movement in it, but it doesn't translate up to the upper body. We're not seeing a lot of chatter. So I actually think that the stance in this rider is at a 4 at senior level. And then getting into basic switch riding. When it comes to switch riding, if this rider was riding switch, we're just looking for a level of comfortability in being able to make some turns on the terrain. And I think if this rider isn't doing a switch section for this run, but if this rider was going switch for this run, I think this would be a 4, because they are showing a little bit of some pretty good comfort in being able to handle this terrain. Okay, so now we're going to get into the observation of this snowboard. We'll let you guys watch and take some notes. Okay, so now let's get into observing and evaluating what this rider is doing and why they're doing it. So some of the stuff that I'm observing is they do have some pretty good tilt in the snowboard, not a lot, but it is present. How are they creating that tilt? Looking at the ankles and in the knees, you can see they do have pretty good flex in their ankles and in their knees. So they do have some good angulation. They're leaning a little bit along with it through the turn shape for that inclination. So they have a pretty good combination of both of them. Getting into those really important reference alignments. You can see as they're going through the turn shape, they are doing a good job of letting the whole body kind of move through the turn as one, letting the snowboard initiate the turn, and the board the body follows. What are some of the things you guys see, and why are they happening?
Well, I see a nice rounded turn shape. Center mass seems to be tracking really well with the center of the board.
Mm-hmm.
See, the rider is really patient, and they're waiting for the snow and the board to respond to their movement, and letting the board ride the snow patiently.
Yeah, that is a key point that is often overlooked. Is you got to wait for that interaction with the snow and the snowboard to let that snowboard change direction. If you say, I want to turn now, and you force that turn, that's when the snowboard isn't doing the turning anymore, and that's when you're forcing it.
They're also changing their flexing and extending also during the shape of the ride in these turns, where they are standing up, as we just saw right there. They're getting taller, and then they're getting smaller as they're going into that initiation of that turn.
So now we're going to watch this rider, keeping the scoring in mind and all the evaluated criteria. Let's watch this rider and judge him. Okay, so now let's get into the scoring of this run. Looking at the first point, we have connected rounded turn shapes, varying sizes, maintaining consistent speed and control. Looking at the turn shape, very even, smooth turns. Looking at the trail left in the snow, you can see he's got really nice crescent shapes. That pivot is gradually happening into the apex of the turn and then coming back around into the next turn. I think that is probably a 5 on the scorecard. Inclination and angulation, creating tilt on medium long radius turns. Here you can see that he does have pretty good flex in his ankles and his knees there. Getting some tilt in the snowboard. I think that is probably a 4 on the scorecard. Utilizing torsional flex to begin rotation and engage the new edge at the initiation of the turn. Looking at this rider here, you can see there's a little bit of a drop in the heel to initiate that front foot. And there you can see that front knee drop down a little bit to initiate the next turn. This is pretty subtle, but the torsional flex is there, so I would give this a 4 on the scorecard. Edging a sheave through inclination and angulation, snow deflecting along the length of the snowboard. Looking at this rider, thinking about the reference alignments, he's pretty centered on his snowboard. He does a really good job of maintaining that stance and keeping himself centered on the snowboard. I would rate that a 4 on the scorecard. I think to bring that up to a 5 or 6, this rider would have to start actively maintaining the pressure a little bit better with flexion and extension to manage that pressure on the snow a little bit better. But he's doing a really good job of keeping himself centered. Athletic stance is maintained throughout, ankles and knees flexed. We can see that the rider is pretty well flexed throughout the run. You can see there's a little bit of extension there, but remember that the scoring is based off an overall impression, and at level is elements appear regularly. They don't have to appear all the time. So I think this rider is doing a great job of keeping an athletic stance regularly. So I'd rate this a 4 on the scorecard. Getting back into switch riding, again, we don't see this rider doing a switch section, but if this run were to be done at switch, I would rate this at a 5. He's pretty comfortable and doing a great job of having really good control of the snowboard while riding in this non-dominant direction. Okay, so we're just going to review the movement analysis process. First, in the OAP, observe what are we seeing. And if you're teaching and you want to give feedback, you want to find the one thing that you want to focus on that is going to provide the most feedback. Evaluate. Why is what we saw happening? What is the rider doing with their body to cause the snowboard to do that? And then last is prescription. How would you fix this? What is the one thing you would do to fix the one thing you saw? If they're doing something you don't want them to do, what is one thing you can do to force them to not do it? If they're opening with their shoulders, having them grab their pant leg so they can kind of get a bit of a tug. is a great thing you can do. If they're not doing something that you do want to see, what is one thing you can do to force them to allow them to do it? If they're struggling with flex, or say that they're breaking at the hips and leaning down instead of keeping their chest up, as they're coming across the hill, have them keep their chest up, focus on looking up the hill as they're coming across on their toe side. And that can help force the movement that we want to see. And if it's tests, how would you score this? Is it a senior level, and why or why not? And if you want more information, you can find this available on the PSIA AASI YouTube website. They have a 5-part YouTube series on A Beginner's Guide to Snowboarding.